On her wedding day, she received an email from her dead mother. Don't marry him. Her phone buzzed on the vanity, its sharp vibration slicing through the quiet hum of anticipation that filled the room. The screen lit up with an unread email notification. Clara froze, her breath catching mid-motion. The subject line blinked back at her. From Mom. It couldn't be. It simply couldn't be. Her mother, Margaret Bennett, had died 5 years ago in a car accident, a tragedy so sudden and senseless that Clara still woke some nights clutching her pillow, searching for comfort against the void left behind. And yet here it was, her mother's name staring back at her from the glowing rectangle of glass. Clara hesitated, her heart pounding wildly against her ribs. With shaking hands, she unlocked the phone and opened the message. There were only 3 words inside. Don't marry him. Her stomach dropped like a stone into icy water. For a moment, she thought she might faint. The words pulsed before her eyes, stark and unyielding. Each letter carved deeper into her mind than the last. This wasn't possible. Dead people didn't send emails. Yet there it was, undeniable proof, or something masquerading as such, in black and white. She sank onto the edge of the bed, trying desperately to make sense of what she'd just seen. Was this some cruel prank? A hacker playing games with her emotions on the most important day of her life? Or could it be something else entirely? Something otherworldly? Clara squeezed her eyes shut, willing herself to wake up from what felt increasingly like a nightmare. But when she opened them again, the email remained unchanged, mocking her with its simplicity. Her thoughts spiraled. Who would do this? Why now? And why those words? Those devastatingly specific words. Ethan Carter, her fiancé, the man she'd loved for nearly 7 years, the man who made her laugh until her sides hurt, who brought her coffee every morning without fail, who whispered promises of forever late into the night. Ethan, whose smile could light up even her darkest days. How could anyone suggest she shouldn't marry him? He was everything good and kind and true about her world. Wasn't he? Doubt slithered in then, cold and insidious, coiling around her heart like a serpent. She hated it immediately, hated how quickly it took root despite all her efforts to push it away. Because deep down, buried beneath layers of love and trust, there were questions she'd never dared ask. Questions about Ethan's past, about the secrets he sometimes seemed to carry behind his warm brown eyes. Questions she'd always told herself didn't matter because they loved each other. But now she wondered if maybe they did. Clara stood abruptly, pacing the length of the room as panic clawed at her chest. What should she do? Ignore the email and walk down the aisle as planned? Confront Ethan? Call off the wedding altogether? Every option felt wrong, tangled up in fear and uncertainty. And then there was the voice, the quiet, insistent whisper in the back of her mind that sounded eerily like her mother's. Listen, it urged. Trust me. Clara stopped pacing and stared at her reflection once more. Beneath the veil and the carefully applied makeup, she looked pale and haunted, like a stranger wearing her face. Today was supposed to mark the beginning of her happily ever after. Instead, it felt like the start of something far darker. A mystery unraveling thread by thread, pulling her toward truths she wasn't sure she wanted to uncover. Whatever lay ahead, one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. Clara's fingers trembled as she pressed them to her temples, trying to steady the storm raging inside her head. The wedding march music swelled faintly in the distance, muffled by closed doors and heavy velvet curtains. She had stalled the ceremony with a whispered excuse about feeling unwell, retreating to a small anteroom tucked away from prying eyes. Alone now, she sat hunched over her phone, rereading the email for what felt like the 100th time. Don't marry him. The words were simple, almost absurdly so, but it wasn't just the message itself that unnerved her. It was the tone, that unmistakable cadence, the way her mother used to speak, direct yet gentle, firm but laced with love. And then there were the details embedded within the body of the email, subtle references only Margaret would know. Remember the summer you broke your arm climbing the oak tree? I told you not to go up there, but you always were stubborn, just like me. Clara's throat tightened at the memory. She'd been 10 years old, fearless and reckless, determined to prove she could scale the towering oak in their backyard despite her mother's warnings. When she fell, fracturing her wrist, Margaret hadn't scolded her. Not really. Instead, she'd cradled Clara in her arms, whispering, "Sometimes bravery gets us hurt, sweetheart, but trusting yourself is how we learn." It was one of countless moments etched into Clara's soul, proof of the bond they'd shared, a bond no hacker or prankster could replicate. Could they? Her mind raced, searching for any logical explanation. A cruel joke orchestrated by someone who knew her history? An imposter using her grief against her? Or worse, could this truly be her mother reaching out from beyond the grave? A sharp knock on the door jolted her back to reality. "Clara," came Ethan's voice, soft and concerned. "Are you okay?" She froze, her pulse quickening. Should she tell him? Show him the email? No, she couldn't. Not yet. Not until she understood what was happening. Summoning every ounce of composure she possessed, she called out, "I'm fine. Just give me a minute." There was a pause long enough to make her wonder if he'd heard the tremor in her voice. Then, reluctantly, his footsteps faded down the hall. As silence settled around her once more, Clara leaned back against the chair and closed her eyes. Her thoughts drifted involuntarily to another time, another place, to the warmth of her childhood home, where her mother's laughter filled the air like sunlight streaming through open windows. Margaret had always been her confidant, her anchor. They spent hours together baking cookies, tending to the garden, or curled up on the couch reading books aloud. Her mother encouraged her dreams, celebrated her victories, and consoled her during heartbreaks. Above all, Margaret taught her daughter to trust herself, to listen to the quiet whispers of intuition that guided her through life's toughest decisions. "Love should feel safe," Margaret often said, brushing a strand of hair from Clara's face. "It should lift you higher, never drag you down. If something doesn't feel right, don't ignore it. Your instincts will never steer you wrong." At the time, those words seemed like universal truths, wisdom passed between generations. Now, sitting alone in this dimly lit room, they felt like a warning, a plea from the past urging her to pay attention. Clara opened her eyes and glanced at the email again. Everything about it screamed authenticity, down to the tiny typo in the second paragraph, a missing comma that her mother always joked was her trademark flaw. Even if someone had gone to great lengths to mimic Margaret's writing style, how could they possibly know such intimate quirks? And yet the alternative, that her mother's spirit might somehow be communicating with her, was too surreal to accept, too terrifying. Clara had never believed in ghosts or messages from the afterlife. She preferred logic, reason, explanations rooted firmly in the tangible world. But logic offered no answers here, only questions. What did her mother mean by "don't marry him"? What secret was she trying to protect Clara from? And why now, on the very day Clara was supposed to commit her life to Ethan? Ethan, the man she loved. The man who had stood by her side through thick and thin, who had dried her tears when the loss of her mother threatened to break her. He was good, kind, devoted. Wasn't he? Doubt crept in again, insidious and relentless. She thought of the times he canceled plans last minute without explanation. The unanswered calls late at night, the brief flicker of hesitation in his eyes whenever she asked about his childhood or his ex-girlfriends. None of these things had ever raised red flags before. They were just quirks, little imperfections that made him human. But now, under the harsh spotlight of suspicion, they loomed larger than ever. Clara clenched her fists, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. She needed answers, but where could she even begin looking? The email provided no clues beyond its cryptic warning. Whoever or whatever had sent it clearly wanted her to question everything she thought she knew. Taking a deep breath, Clara forced herself to focus. One step at a time. First, she would verify whether the email was genuine. Then she would confront Ethan, if she found the courage. Until then, she resolved to keep the message hidden, guarding it like a fragile shard of truth amidst the chaos swirling around her. The music outside grew louder, signaling the start of the processional. Guests were taking their seats, unaware of the turmoil brewing behind closed doors. Clara rose shakily to her feet, smoothing her gown one final time. Whatever happened next, she couldn't run away. She owed it to herself and to her mother to uncover the truth, even if it meant unraveling the life she thought she wanted. Clara's fingers hovered over the phone, trembling slightly as she debated whether to make the call. Her older brother Daniel was the only person she could trust with this. His level-headed pragmatism had always balanced her more emotional nature. If anyone could help her untangle the impossible, it was him. She dialed his number, each ring stretching out like an eternity, until his familiar voice finally answered. "Hey, sis," Daniel said warmly. "Isn't today your big day? How's everything going?" Clara hesitated, gripping the edge of the table for support. "Danny, something weird happened. I don't know how to explain it." His tone shifted instantly, sharpening with concern. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" "I got an email," she began haltingly. "From Mom." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "What do you mean, from Mom?" he asked cautiously, skepticism creeping into his voice. "You know that's not possible, right?" "I know," Clara replied, her words tumbling out in a rush. "But it feels like her. The way it's written, it's exactly how she used to talk to me. And there are details in there, Danny, things only Mom would know. Like when I broke my arm climbing the oak tree and what she said to me afterward. It's eerie." Daniel exhaled sharply, clearly struggling to process what she was saying. "Okay, slow down. Did you check the sender's address? Could it be someone spoofing her account?" "That's the thing," Clara said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "It came from her actual email account, the one we set up together after Dad died. No one else should have access to it." Daniel fell silent again, and Clara could almost hear the gears turning in his mind. Finally, he spoke. "Let me look into it. I manage all of her old accounts since—" His voice trailed off, but Clara knew what he meant. "Since she passed away. No one else has touched them, not even you or me. Whoever sent this must have hacked in somehow." Relief washed over Clara at the thought of having someone take charge, even if it was just to investigate further. "Thank you, Danny. I don't know what I'd do without you." "Don't mention it," he said firmly. "Just sit tight while I dig around. I'll call you back as soon as I find anything." True to his word, Daniel called back less than an hour later. This time, his voice carried a note of disbelief tinged with unease. "You're not going to believe this," he said without preamble. "I traced the origin of the email. It didn't come from any external source. It originated from the old family desktop computer still sitting in the house." Clara's heart skipped a beat. "The old Dell in the study? That thing hasn't been turned on in years." "I know," Daniel confirmed grimly, "which means either someone physically accessed the computer recently, or something else entirely is going on." A chill ran down Clara's spine. The family home was miles away, nestled in the quiet suburbs where they'd grown up. Neither she nor Daniel had stepped foot inside it in months, let alone powered up the ancient machine gathering dust in the corner of the study. The idea that someone might have broken in and used it to send the email felt far-fetched, but no less disturbing. "Do you think it could be a hacker?" Clara asked, clutching the phone tighter. "Someone trying to mess with me on my wedding day?" "It's possible," Daniel admitted reluctantly, "but hacking isn't usually this targeted. Most cybercriminals go for low-hanging fruit, stealing identities, holding data for ransom. Sending a cryptic message designed to sabotage your relationship seems personal." The weight of his words settled heavily between them. Personal. Someone or something wanted Clara to doubt Ethan, to question the foundation of their life together. But who and why? "What do we do now?" Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. "For starters, we need to secure the computer," Daniel said decisively. "If whoever did this left behind any traces, logs, files, metadata, they'll be stored locally. I'll drive over to the house tonight and bring it back to my place so I can run a full diagnostic. In the meantime, don't tell anyone about this. Not Ethan, not the guests, not even Aunt Susan. We don't want to tip off whoever's behind it. Clara nodded, though he couldn't see her. Keeping the email a secret went against every instinct she had, especially when it came to Ethan. He deserved honesty, transparency. Yet something deep within her, a primal sense of self-preservation, urged caution. Until she understood the truth, she couldn't risk exposing herself or anyone else to whatever danger lurked beneath the surface. Okay, she agreed quietly. I won't say anything. Just hurry, Danny. Please. I will, he promised. And Clara, whatever happens, remember what Mom always told us. Trust yourself. You'll figure this out. As the call ended, Clara stared at the phone in her hand, Daniel's words echoing in her mind. Trust herself. Simple advice, yet it felt monumental now, laden with meaning she couldn't fully grasp. She glanced toward the door, half expecting Ethan to burst in and demand answers. For a fleeting moment, she wondered if she already knew the truth, if some buried part of her had suspected all along that something about him wasn't quite right. But suspicion wasn't proof. Not yet. With a deep breath, Clara squared her shoulders and slipped the phone into the hidden pocket of her gown. One way or another, she would uncover the secrets hidden within that dusty old computer and maybe, just maybe, find the answers her mother had tried so desperately to give her. The reception hall buzzed with laughter and music, the air thick with the scent of roses and candle wax. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the room, reflecting off polished silverware and champagne flutes. To anyone else, Clara appeared radiant, a blushing bride floating through her fairy tale evening. But beneath the surface, her mind churned like storm-tossed waves. Ethan stood beside her, his arm draped casually around her waist as they greeted well-wishers. His smile was warm, his charm effortless, but something about it felt off, forced. Every glance he gave her seemed to linger just a fraction too long, as if searching for cracks in her carefully constructed facade. You seem distracted, he murmured during a rare lull in the festivities. His voice was low, tinged with concern, or was it suspicion? Is everything okay? Clara forced herself to meet his gaze, schooling her features into an expression of serene happiness. Of course. Just wedding jitters, I guess. It's all hitting me at once. He chuckled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Well, you're stuck with me now. No backing out. Her stomach twisted at his words, though she managed a weak laugh. Wouldn't dream of it. For a moment, their eyes locked, and Clara felt the weight of his scrutiny impressing down on her. Did he know? Could he sense the turmoil roiling inside her? She quickly looked away, focusing instead on the swirl of dancers twirling across the floor. As the evening wore on, Ethan's behavior only deepened her unease. He steered conversations towards safe topics, travel plans, favorite honeymoon destinations, mutual friends, as if deliberately avoiding anything personal or probing. When Clara tried to broach the subject of leaving early, citing a headache and the need to check on some forgotten errands, he dismissed her concerns with practiced ease. You've been working so hard these past few weeks, he said smoothly, handing her another glass of sparkling water. Tonight is about celebrating. Let's stay a while longer, enjoy ourselves. His tone left no room for argument, yet there was an edge to it that prickled at Clara's instincts. Was he simply being attentive, ensuring she didn't overexert herself? Or was he trying to keep her close, to control her movements? It wasn't just his words that unsettled her. It was the small, almost imperceptible gestures, the way he subtly shifted positions whenever someone approached them, positioning himself between Clara and the newcomer, the fleeting hesitation before answering questions about his childhood or previous relationships, followed by a deflecting joke or vague response. And then there was the phone call, an innocuous interruption that sent him stepping outside for privacy, leaving Clara alone with her thoughts. She watched him through the French doors, pacing along the terrace as he spoke into his cell. His body language was tense, guarded, unlike the relaxed confidence he usually exuded. Who was he talking to? What secrets did he carry in those clipped sentences and furtive glances? By the time he returned, Clara's hands were trembling slightly. She clutched her napkin to steady them, forcing a smile as he slid back into his seat beside her. "Everything all right?" she asked lightly, hating how strained her own voice sounded. "Just work stuff," he replied with a dismissive wave. "Nothing to worry about." But worry was exactly what she felt, coiling tighter with each passing minute. Her thoughts drifted repeatedly to the family computer waiting miles away, its dusty keyboard holding answers she desperately needed. Daniel had promised to retrieve it tonight, but until then she was trapped in this gilded cage of celebration, unable to act on the gnawing suspicions building inside her. Ethan leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. "Let's dance," he suggested, standing and extending a hand. Clara hesitated, torn between her desire to escape and the need to maintain appearances. Refusing would raise questions she wasn't ready to answer. Not here, not now. With a resigned sigh, she allowed him to lead her onto the dance floor, where couples swayed under the soft glow of string lights. As they moved together, Ethan's grip on her hand was firm but gentle, guiding her steps with practiced precision. Yet even in his embrace, Clara couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Not by him, but by something darker lurking just beyond the edges of the room. Her mother's warning echoed in her mind, louder now than ever. "Don't marry him." She closed her eyes, willing herself to focus on the music, the rhythm, anything to drown out the rising tide of doubt. But when she opened them again, Ethan's gaze met hers, searching, probing. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw something flicker in his eyes, something cold and calculating that didn't belong there. And in that moment, Clara realized two things. First, that she was running out of time, and second, that trusting Ethan might be the most dangerous choice she could make. The drive to her childhood home felt like moving through a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. Clara's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white against the soft glow of the dashboard lights. The world outside blurred into streaks of shadow and street lamp as she navigated familiar roads, each turn bringing her closer to answers that promised both clarity and chaos. She had lied to Ethan, feigning exhaustion after the reception to avoid the honeymoon plans they'd meticulously arranged, a romantic getaway to a secluded cabin in the mountains. "I'm sorry," she'd murmured, avoiding his eyes. "I just need rest. We can reschedule." He hadn't argued, though there was a flicker of disappointment, or was it frustration, in his expression before he masked it with understanding. Now, sitting alone in the quiet cocoon of her car, Clara replayed the lie over and over in her mind. Was this betrayal or self-preservation? She didn't know anymore. All she knew was that the weight of the email and everything it implied was too heavy to ignore. When she pulled into the driveway of the family home, nostalgia hit her like a wave. The house stood unchanged, its white siding glowing faintly under the moonlight, the porch swaying gently in the breeze. It was a place of memories, laughter-filled summers, cozy winters by the fire, and long talks with her mother about life, love, and trust. But tonight the house felt different, charged with an eerie energy that made the hair on her arms rise. Clara let herself inside, flipping on the light switch with trembling fingers. Dust motes danced in the sudden brightness, revealing the untouched study where the old Dell computer sat atop a cluttered desk. Its screen was blank, its keyboard covered in a thin layer of grime. She approached it cautiously, half expecting it to hum with some supernatural force. Instead, it remained silent, waiting. Daniel arrived not long after, his face etched with concern, but also curiosity. He carried a toolbox and a laptop bag slung over one shoulder, looking every bit the tech-savvy older brother, ready to tackle whatever mystery lay ahead. "You sure about this?" he asked as he set his gear down beside the ancient machine. "Once we start digging, there's no turning back." Clara nodded firmly. "I have to know, Danny. Whatever's going on, I need answers." He gave her a reassuring smile before powering up the computer. A faint whirring sound filled the room as the system booted up, accompanied by the nostalgic chime of Windows XP. When the login screen appeared, their hearts sank momentarily. It was password protected. Of course it is, Daniel muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. Any idea what Mom might have used? Clara stared at the blinking cursor, her mind racing through possibilities. Her mother wasn't particularly tech-savvy, so it was unlikely to be anything overly complex. Still, guessing wrong too many times could lock them out completely. She always said things like, "Truth will set you free," Clara mused aloud, recalling late-night conversations where Margaret emphasized honesty above all else. Maybe it's worth a shot, Daniel encouraged, leaning forward expectantly. With bated breath, Clara typed in the phrase, her fingers hovering nervously above the enter key. For a moment, nothing happened. Then with a satisfying click, the screen unlocked, granting them access to the desktop. A rush of relief and dread washed over her. They were in. Now came the hard part. The interface was clunky and outdated, littered with shortcuts to programs long forgotten. Daniel immediately took charge, navigating to the email client while Clara scanned the files for anything unusual. Folders labeled Recipes, Family Photos and Taxes 2015 offered little intrigue. But one folder stood out among the rest. Clara's future. Her breath caught. That wasn't something her mother had ever mentioned. "What's this?" Daniel asked, noticing her reaction. Before she could answer, he double-clicked the folder, revealing a series of documents and image files. One document in particular caught their attention, a text file titled "For Clara, if you're reading this." Clara's pulse quickened as she opened it. Inside was a message written in her mother's unmistakable style, a mix of warmth and urgency. "My dearest Clara, if you found this, then something has gone terribly wrong. I hope you'll forgive me for not telling you sooner, but there are truths I couldn't risk sharing while I was alive. Truths about people who may try to hurt you if they knew I suspected them. Trust your instincts, sweetheart, always. If someone tells you to ignore this, don't listen. Protect yourself, and remember, love should never come at the cost of your safety or peace of mind. I love you more than words can say. Be brave. Love. Mom ****. Tears welled in Clara's eyes as she read the words, her chest tightening with emotion. This wasn't just a warning. It was a plea, a final act of protection from beyond the grave. "What does she mean by people who may try to hurt you?" Daniel asked quietly, reading over her shoulder. His voice was steady, but there was a flicker of unease in his gaze. "I don't know," Clara admitted, wiping away tears, "but I think we're about to find out." Together they began combing through the other files in the folder. There were screenshots of emails exchanged between Margaret and various unknown contacts, cryptic notes detailing strange occurrences, and even photographs of individuals whose faces sent shivers down Clara's spine. Among them was a picture of Ethan, a candid shot taken from afar, dated months before they started dating. Clara's blood ran cold. How had her mother known him? And why had she been watching him? The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place, but the bigger picture remained obscured, shrouded in shadows of doubt and danger. Whatever secrets her mother had uncovered, they were tied directly to Ethan, and Clara realized with growing certainty that unraveling them might put her own life at risk. But turning back was no longer an option. The hum of the old computer filled the room, a steady drone that seemed to echo the tension crackling in the air. Clara sat rigid in her chair, her eyes glued to the screen as Daniel clicked through the labyrinth of folders and files their mother had left behind. Each discovery felt like peeling back layers of a long-buried secret, one that had been waiting patiently for this moment to surface. Among the documents were journal entries spanning decades, meticulously dated and organized by year. Some entries were mundane, a grocery list here, a reminder about Clara's ballet recital there, but others hinted at something darker. Margaret wrote of uneasy encounters with strangers, cryptic warnings from unnamed sources, and an underlying paranoia that grew more pronounced as the years went on. "This is insane," Daniel murmured, scrolling through a particularly troubling entry. "Listen to this. He approached me again today. I don't know how much longer I can keep dodging him without raising suspicion. Whatever he wants, it's dangerous. I need to protect my children." "Who's he?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her stomach churned as she stared at the words, so stark against the pale glow of the monitor. Was this connected to Ethan? Or was it someone else entirely? "I don't know," Daniel admitted, his brow furrowed in concentration. "But look at these photos." He opened another file, revealing grainy images of unfamiliar faces, men in suits, women in sunglasses, all captured candidly as though Margaret had been following them. Among them, Clara spotted Ethan once more, this time standing near a sleek black car outside what appeared to be a corporate office building. Clara leaned closer, her pulse quickening. "That's definitely him. But why would Mom have taken pictures of him? They never even met." Daniel didn't answer immediately, his attention drawn to yet another folder nestled deep within the archives. Its title sent an icy chill coursing through Clara's veins. "For Clara, if you ever doubt him." Her breath hitched, and for a moment she couldn't move. The cursor hovered over the folder, trembling slightly as if reflecting her own fear. She glanced at Daniel, who gave her a grim nod of encouragement. "Go ahead," he said softly. "We need to see what's inside." With trembling fingers, Clara double-clicked the folder. It opened to reveal a collection of documents, audio files, and timestamps labeled with meticulous precision. One document caught her eye first, a typed letter addressed directly to her. "My dearest Clara, if you're reading this, then your instincts have led you here because something or someone has made you question the truth. I hoped you'd never have to face this, but I prepared for the possibility all the same. There are people in this world who wear masks, hiding their true intentions behind smiles and charm. Ethan Carter is one such man. I cannot tell you everything I know without risking both our lives. But I will say this, he is not who he claims to be. Be cautious, sweetheart. Trust no one, not even those closest to you, until you uncover the whole story. Remember, love should make you stronger, not weaker. If he tries to isolate you, control you, or silence you, run. Run as far and as fast as you can. I love you more than life itself. Stay safe. Forever yours. Mom ***. Tears blurred Clara's vision as she read the words, each sentence carving deeper into her heart. Her mother hadn't just suspected Ethan. She had actively feared him. But why? What had she uncovered that warranted such dire warnings? Before Clara could process further, Daniel clicked on one of the audio files. A soft, static-filled recording began to play, and Margaret's voice filled the room, warm yet tinged with urgency. "Clara, if you hear this, please listen carefully. Ethan isn't working alone. He's tied to a group, a network of individuals who exploit trust for profit and power. I don't know all the details, but they're dangerous. I've seen enough to understand that anyone who crosses them disappears. Or worse," a pause followed by a shaky intake of breath. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner. Please promise me you'll stay vigilant. Protect yourself, and whatever you do, don't let them find out you know." The recording ended abruptly, leaving only silence in its wake. Clara sat frozen, her hands gripping the edge of the desk as reality shifted beneath her feet. This wasn't paranoia or coincidence. It was evidence. Cold, undeniable proof that Ethan had been hiding something monumental. "What kind of group?" Daniel asked, breaking the heavy quiet. His voice was strained, his usual calm demeanor replaced by mounting alarm. "And why would Mom get involved?" Clara shook her head, unable to form coherent thoughts. Her mind raced with questions, fragments of memories colliding with newfound truths. Had Ethan targeted her deliberately, knowing her connection to her mother? Was their entire relationship built on lies? She turned back to the computer, determined to piece together the rest of the puzzle. Beneath the audio files lay more documents detailing Margaret's investigations, notes on Ethan's background, references to companies and aliases linked to him, and even a timeline of events leading up to her death. One note stood out among the rest. "They're watching me. I think they suspect I know too much. If anything happens to me, don't believe the official story. Look closer." A cold sweat broke out across Clara's skin. The car accident that claimed her mother's life had always seemed tragic but random. Now every detail, the late-night drive, the deserted road, the lack of witnesses, felt sinister, calculated. "We need to figure out who they are," Daniel said firmly, snapping her out of her spiraling thoughts. "And we need to do it fast. Whoever your mother crossed, they're still out there." Clara nodded numbly, her resolve hardening despite the weight of the revelations. For years, she'd believed her mother's death was a cruel twist of fate. Now she understood it was something far darker, a deliberate act meant to silence her. As the clock ticked toward midnight, the siblings continued their search, piecing together clues that painted a chilling picture of deception and danger. With each new discovery, Clara felt the walls closing in around her, the stakes rising higher than ever before. But one thing was certain: she wouldn't stop until she uncovered the truth, even if it cost her everything. The room grew colder with each passing revelation, as if the truth itself were seeping into the air, chilling Clara to her core. Daniel sat hunched over the keyboard, his face pale and drawn, while Clara clutched the armrest of her chair like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but the picture they formed was darker than either of them could have imagined. Daniel opened another audio file, this one crackling slightly with age. Margaret's voice emerged once more, calm yet urgent, recounting details that sent shockwaves through Clara's mind. "Clara, sweetheart, I need you to hear me. When you first introduced Ethan, Nathan Cole, I knew something wasn't right. It wasn't just a mother's intuition. I decided to dig deeper after noticing inconsistencies in his stories. What I found terrified me." Clara's breath hitched at the mention of the name Nathan Cole. She glanced at Daniel, who looked equally stunned, his jaw tightening as he listened intently. "As though Ethan, or Nathan, isn't who he says he is. Years ago, before he met you, he was implicated in a massive financial fraud scheme. He used aliases and charm to swindle people out of their savings, leaving devastation in his wake. But that's not all. He targeted women, specifically wealthy ones, married them, drained their accounts, and vanished without a trace. At least 3 women reported him missing under suspicious circumstances, but no charges ever stuck because he covered his tracks so well." Margaret paused, her voice wavering for the first time. "When I realized who he really was, I hired a private investigator to gather concrete evidence against him. I couldn't confront you directly, not until I had proof. You were so happy, so in love, and I didn't want to ruin that unless I was absolutely certain. But now, I fear it may already be too late." The recording ended abruptly, leaving behind an oppressive silence. Clara stared blankly at the screen, her thoughts spinning wildly. Everything she thought she knew about Ethan, his kindness, his devotion, his unwavering support, was a lie, a carefully constructed facade designed to deceive her. "Financial fraud," Daniel muttered under his breath, scrolling through accompanying documents Margaret had saved alongside the recordings. "Look at this. It's a police report from 5 years ago. Someone filed a complaint accusing Nathan Cole of embezzling funds from a small business. The case was dropped due to lack of evidence." He clicked on another document, a dossier compiled by the private investigator Margaret had hired. Inside were photos, bank statements, and witness testimonies linking Nathan to multiple aliases and fraudulent activities. One section detailed his pattern: targeting vulnerable women, gaining their trust, and isolating them from friends and family until they were completely dependent on him. "This guy's a predator," Daniel said grimly, shaking his head. "And Mom figured it out before anyone else could warn you." Clara felt bile rise in her throat as she flipped through the files herself. There were screenshots of forged documents, fake IDs bearing Ethan's face but different names, and even emails exchanged between him and accomplices discussing targets and exits. Each piece of evidence hammered home the horrifying reality. Ethan had chosen her deliberately, weaving himself into her life with precision and purpose. But what struck her hardest was the realization that her mother had died trying to protect her. Margaret hadn't perished in a random accident. She had been silenced, killed to prevent her from exposing the truth about Ethan and the dangerous network he belonged to. "We need to call the police," Daniel said firmly, snapping Clara out of her daze. "This is enough evidence to put him away for good." "No," Clara replied sharply, surprising even herself. Her voice trembled, but there was steel beneath the fear. "If we go to the authorities now, he'll disappear again. We can't let that happen. Not after everything Mom did to stop him." Daniel frowned, clearly torn. "Then what do you suggest? Confront him ourselves?" Clara hesitated, her mind racing. As much as she wanted to run straight to the police, she knew her brother was right. They couldn't risk tipping off Ethan prematurely. If he suspected they knew anything, he'd vanish, taking whatever secrets he carried with him. And worse, he might come after her next. "We set a trap," she said finally, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "We use what we've learned to force him into revealing more, maybe even leading us to whoever else is involved." Daniel studied her for a moment, searching her face for any sign of doubt. Finally, he nodded reluctantly. "All right, but we do this carefully. No unnecessary risks." Clara agreed, though deep down she knew the danger was unavoidable. The stakes were higher than ever now, not just for her, but for every other woman Ethan might target if they failed to stop him. As they continued reviewing the files, one final discovery left them both reeling. Buried among the documents was a handwritten note from Margaret, dated just days before her death. "If anything happens to me, tell Clara to look for the key. It's hidden where the oak tree used to stand." "The oak tree," Daniel echoed, frowning. "That thing came down in a storm last year." Clara's heart skipped a beat. She remembered the day vividly, the way the old oak had split in two during a violent thunderstorm, its roots tearing up chunks of earth. Beneath it, nestled in the soil, had been a small metal box containing trinkets from her childhood. She'd assumed it was nothing more than a time capsule, forgotten over the years. Now she wondered if her mother had intended it as something far more important. Without another word, Clara grabbed her coat and headed for the door. Daniel followed close behind, his expression grim but resolute. Whatever secrets lay buried beneath the remnants of the oak tree, they were about to unearth them, and hopefully bring Ethan's web of lies crashing down once and for all. The night air was sharp and biting as Clara knelt in the damp soil where the old oak tree once stood, its massive roots now reduced to splintered remnants. Her hands trembled as she dug into the earth with a small trowel, each scrape against the dirt echoing the turmoil inside her. The weight of what she'd uncovered, the lies, the danger, the betrayal, pressed heavily on her chest, threatening to crush her beneath its enormity. When her fingers finally brushed against something solid, she froze, her breath catching. Carefully, she unearthed a rusted metal box, its surface weathered but intact. Inside were not just childhood mementos, as she had once thought, but a collection of documents wrapped in plastic, bank records, handwritten notes, and a single key attached to a tag labeled Safety Deposit Box #214. Clara sat back on her heels, staring at the items through tears that blurred her vision. This wasn't just a time capsule. It was her mother's final safeguard, a lifeline thrown across the void of death to guide her towards safety. Margaret hadn't simply suspected Ethan. She had meticulously prepared for this moment, ensuring Clara would have the tools to protect herself long after she was gone. Daniel crouched beside her, his face shadowed by the dim glow of the flashlight he held. "Mom always planned for everything," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion, "even when we didn't realize it." Clara nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She wanted to scream, to cry, to rage against the injustice of it all. How could Ethan, a man she had trusted so completely, be capable of such calculated cruelty? And how could her own happiness have been built on such a foundation of deceit? But beneath the devastation lay an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for her mother's love, her sacrifices, her unyielding determination to shield her children from harm. Margaret hadn't hesitated to put herself in danger, risking everything to expose the truth. Even in death, she continued to fight for Clara, guiding her steps with quiet, steadfast resolve. "I can't believe she did all this," Clara whispered, clutching the documents to her chest. "She gave up so much for me." "She loved you more than anything," Daniel replied, his voice breaking slightly. "And I'm sorry, I should have told you sooner. I knew some of what Mom was investigating. Not everything, but enough to know something wasn't right about Ethan." Clara turned to him sharply, startled. "You knew? Why didn't you say anything?" Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Because I didn't want to ruin your happiness. You were so in love, Clara. For the first time since Dad died, you seemed truly happy. I kept telling myself maybe Mom was wrong, or maybe whatever she found wasn't as bad as it looked. I convinced myself you'd figure it out if something was off." His confession stung, but Clara couldn't summon anger. She understood his reasoning, even if she didn't agree with it. They had both been blinded by their desire to see her happy, unwilling to confront the possibility that Ethan might be anything other than the man he claimed to be. "But now," Daniel trailed off, his expression grim, "now we know the truth, and we can't let him get away with it." Clara nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. The pain of betrayal burned fiercely within her, but it was tempered by a newfound clarity. Ethan had underestimated her and her mother. He had assumed that Margaret's death would bury the truth forever, that no one would dare question his carefully constructed facade. But he had failed to account for the strength of a mother's love and the resilience of her daughter. As they gathered the contents of the box and returned to the house, Clara allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She pictured her mother sitting at this very desk years ago, typing emails, making calls, piecing together fragments of evidence late into the night. Margaret hadn't acted out of fear or paranoia. She had acted out of love, a love so profound that it transcended even death itself. For the first time since reading the email, Clara felt a flicker of hope, not because the road ahead would be easy, but because she wasn't alone. Her mother's legacy lived on in every clue they uncovered, every secret they exposed, and with Daniel by her side, she knew she had the strength to face whatever came next. They spread the new documents across the study table, piecing together the puzzle piece by piece. Each revelation brought them closer to understanding the full scope of Ethan's deception and the network he served. But one thing became abundantly clear. Bringing him down wouldn't just end his reign of manipulation. It would honor Margaret's memory and ensure that no one else would suffer at his hands. Clara straightened, her jaw set with determination. "We'll finish what Mom started," she said firmly, meeting Daniel's gaze. "No matter what it takes." Her brother nodded, his expression resolute. Together they bent over the files once more, ready to step into the shadows their mother had fought so hard to illuminate. The apartment felt eerily quiet as Clara stepped inside, the weight of what she was about to do pressing down on her like an invisible force. Every step echoed unnaturally loud against the hardwood floors, each sound amplifying the tension coiled tight within her chest. She carried a single folder clutched tightly in her hands, copies of Margaret's evidence, meticulously organized and damning in its clarity. Ethan sat on the couch, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp with suspicion. He glanced up from his phone as she entered, offering her one of his trademark smiles, the same warm, disarming grin that had once made her heart skip a beat. Now it only fueled her resolve. "Hey," he said, setting the phone aside. "You're back early. I thought you'd be at the house longer." Clara didn't respond immediately. Instead, she took a deep breath, steadying herself before walking further into the room. Her voice came out steady, though her hands betrayed her nerves by trembling slightly around the edges of the folder. "We need to talk," she said simply, her tone leaving no room for argument. Ethan's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of unease. About what? This. Clara placed the folder on the coffee table between them and slid it open, revealing bank statements, forged IDs, and screenshots of incriminating emails. For a moment there was silence, a heavy, suffocating stillness broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Ethan leaned forward, scanning the documents with growing alarm. His expression shifted rapidly from confusion to disbelief, then finally to something darker, anger. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice clipped and cold. "Where did you get these?" "It doesn't matter where they came from," Clara replied evenly, meeting his gaze without flinching. "What matters is that they're real. You're not who you say you are, Ethan. Or should I call you Nathan?" For a split second, his mask slipped entirely. Shock registered plainly on his face, followed quickly by calculation as he scrambled to regain control of the situation. "Clara, listen to me. Someone must have planted this stuff to frame me. You know me. I would never. Don't lie to me." The words burst out of her, raw and unfiltered, cutting him off mid-sentence. Her voice shook now, but not from fear, from fury. "I know everything. About the fraud, the aliases, the women you used and abandoned. My mother uncovered it all, and she died because of you." Ethan's jaw tightened, his composure fracturing under the pressure. "Your mother? What does she have to do with any of this?" "She knew who you really were," Clara spat, her eyes blazing. "She hired a private investigator, gathered proof, and tried to warn me. But you found out, didn't you? And you made sure she couldn't stop you." "That's insane," Ethan shot back, standing abruptly. "I cared about your mother. Yes, I changed my name after some mistakes in my past, but I turned my life around. For you, Clara. Don't throw everything we have away over lies someone fed you." "They're not lies," Daniel interjected, stepping out from the hallway where he'd been waiting silently. He held up his phone, displaying audio recordings of Margaret's warnings and timestamps linking Ethan to suspicious activities. "We have irrefutable proof." Ethan froze, his gaze darting between Clara and Daniel. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely afraid. Slowly, he sank back onto the couch, running a hand through his hair as if trying to piece together a way out. Finally, he spoke, his voice quieter now, almost pleading. "Okay, fine. Maybe I wasn't completely honest about my past, but none of that matters anymore, Clara. I love you. I chose you. Not for your money or anything else, but because I truly care about you." Clara stared at him, her heart pounding violently in her chest. Part of her wanted desperately to believe him, to cling to the illusion of the man she thought she knew. But the truth was undeniable, laid bare before her in black and white. Love didn't erase betrayal. It couldn't justify manipulation or violence. "You don't get to twist this into something noble," she said, her voice low and steady. "You lied to me from the beginning. You used me, just like you used those other women, and you let my mother die to protect yourself." Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but she cut him off, her tone icy and final. "It's over. I'm going to the police with everything, and if you try to run, I'll make sure they find you." His shoulders slumped, defeat settling over him like a shadow. For a moment, he looked almost pitiful, a predator cornered, stripped of his charm and charisma. Then slowly, a bitter smirk curled at the corners of his lips. "You'll regret this," he murmured, his voice tinged with venom. "You think exposing me will bring you peace? All it'll do is drag your family's name through the mud, right alongside mine." Clara felt a pang of doubt, but only for a moment. She straightened, drawing strength from the memory of her mother's sacrifices. "Maybe, but at least the truth will come out. That's more than you ever deserved." With that, she turned and walked toward the door, Daniel following close behind. As they left the apartment, Clara didn't look back. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, facing the authorities, dealing with public scrutiny, unraveling the tangled web Ethan had woven. But for the first time in days, she felt free. Free from his lies, free from his control, and most importantly, free to honor her mother's legacy by ensuring justice was served, no matter the cost. The days following Ethan's arrest passed in a blur of interviews, affidavits, and late-night strategy sessions with detectives. Clara and Daniel worked tirelessly, ensuring every piece of evidence their mother had painstakingly gathered was handed over to the authorities. It wasn't just about bringing Ethan to justice. It was about dismantling the web of deceit he had spun, exposing the truth for all to see. When the police finally raided Ethan's belongings, both at their shared apartment and his office, they uncovered even more incriminating material: hidden bank accounts, forged documents linking him to other aliases, and encrypted files detailing his connections to a larger network of fraudsters. The depth of his deception shocked even Clara, who thought she'd braced herself for the worst. But the real turning point came when other women began stepping forward, women whose lives had been shattered by Ethan, or Nathan Cole, years before he entered Clara's world. Their stories were eerily similar, tales of whirlwind romances, financial manipulation, and sudden disappearances that left them broken and distrustful. Some had lost fortunes, others had nearly lost themselves. One woman, Rachel, reached out directly to Clara after seeing her story splashed across the news. "You're not alone," Rachel wrote in an email. "I saw myself in your story. He did the same thing to me 5 years ago, but I was too ashamed to speak up back then. Thank you for having the courage to come forward." Clara replied immediately, inviting Rachel to share her experience with investigators. Slowly but surely, a chorus of voices rose, corroborating the accusations against Ethan and painting a damning portrait of a man who thrived on exploiting vulnerability. Together, they formed a reluctant sisterhood bound by pain and resilience. As the case gained national attention, it sparked a broader conversation about trust, manipulation, and the importance of listening to one's instincts. Talk shows and opinion pieces dissected the psychology behind predators like Ethan, urging viewers to recognize red flags often dismissed as harmless quirks: excessive charm, isolation tactics, inconsistencies in stories. Experts praised Margaret's foresight, highlighting how her meticulous documentation could serve as a blueprint for others facing similar situations. For Clara, the media coverage was both cathartic and overwhelming. She agreed to a single televised interview, sitting beside Daniel as they recounted their mother's bravery and the lengths she'd gone to protect her family. Her voice trembled at times, but her message remained clear. Love should never come at the cost of your safety or self-worth. Trust yourself, and if something feels wrong, don't ignore it. The interview resonated deeply with audiences, particularly women in their 50s and beyond, who saw echoes of their own struggles in Clara's story. Letters poured in from strangers, thanking her for speaking out, sharing their own experiences of betrayal and healing. Many credited her courage with giving them the strength to confront their own doubts, or seek closure for wounds long buried. Meanwhile, Ethan's trial loomed on the horizon. Prosecutors built a robust case using the mountain of evidence Clara and Daniel provided, bolstered by testimony from his victims and forensic experts. Though Ethan attempted to negotiate plea deals and deflect blame onto unnamed accomplices, the sheer volume of proof made it impossible for him to escape accountability. In the months leading up to the verdict, Clara found solace in rediscovering parts of herself she'd neglected during her relationship with Ethan. She reconnected with old friends, joined a local book club, and volunteered at a shelter for survivors of domestic abuse, a cause inspired by her mother's legacy. Each small step toward reclaiming her life felt like a tribute to Margaret, a way of honoring the sacrifices she'd made. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived. Ethan stood stoic in court as the jury delivered their decision, guilty on all counts, including fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The judge sentenced him to 25 years without parole, citing the irreparable harm he'd inflicted on countless lives. As the gavel struck, Clara exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Justice had been served, not just for her, but for every woman Ethan had wronged. For her mother, whose death would no longer be in vain. That evening, Clara returned to the quiet sanctuary of her childhood home. She walked through the familiar rooms, tracing her fingers along surfaces imbued with memories of laughter, love, and loss. In the study, she paused before the dusty old computer, now disconnected and silent. A wave of gratitude washed over her, for her mother's wisdom, for Daniel's unwavering support, and for the inner strength she'd discovered within herself. She opened the window, letting cool night air sweep through their room. Outside, stars twinkled brightly against the velvet sky, their light piercing through the darkness. Clara stepped onto the porch, gazing upward as a sense of peace settled over her. Her journey wasn't over. There would still be sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and lingering scars, but she faced the future with renewed purpose. Margaret's final gift to her daughter hadn't just been answers. It had been freedom. Freedom to heal, to grow, and to build a life rooted in truth and trust. And as Clara stood there beneath the vast expanse of stars, she whispered softly into the night, "Thank you, Mom. I'll make you proud." The childhood home, once a silent witness to loss and unanswered questions, now felt alive with warmth and renewal. Clara moved through its rooms as if rediscovering an old friend, each creak of the floorboards and flicker of sunlight through the curtains stirring memories both tender and bittersweet. It was here, surrounded by the echoes of her mother's laughter and the lingering scent of Margaret's favorite lavender soap, that Clara began to truly heal. She started small, tidying up the study where they'd uncovered the truth, dusting off shelves laden with photo albums and knickknacks from years gone by. As she flipped through faded Polaroids and yellow letters, Clara found herself smiling at forgotten moments. Family vacations, holiday dinners, impromptu dance parties in the living room. These fragments of joy reminded her of what her mother had always cherished most, the connections between people, the bonds that endured even after death. One afternoon, while sorting through a box of recipes tucked away in the kitchen pantry, Clara stumbled upon something unexpected. A handwritten note from Margaret scrawled on the back of a grocery list. "Cooking is love made visible," it read. "Pass this tradition to your children someday." Tears welled in Clara's eyes as she traced the looping script with her fingertips. She hadn't cooked much since moving out on her own. Life had been too busy, too chaotic. But now, standing in the cozy kitchen where she'd spent countless hours baking cookies with her mother, she felt compelled to honor the request. That evening, she called Daniel and invited him over for dinner, a meal inspired by one of Margaret's classic dishes, roast chicken with rosemary potatoes and honey-glazed carrots. When Daniel arrived, carrying a bottle of wine and a mischievous grin, Clara greeted him with a hug that lingered longer than usual. They worked side by side in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, seasoning the chicken, and swapping stories about their childhood antics. For the first time in months, the air between them felt light, unburdened by secrets or sorrow. "You know," Daniel said as they sat down to eat, "I think Mom would have loved seeing us like this, together again." Clara nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "Me too. I miss her so much, Danny. But being here, doing these things she loved, it helps. It feels like she's still with us somehow." Daniel reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "She is, sis, in every memory we share, every lesson she taught us. Her legacy lives on, not just in this house, but in you." Their conversation drifted into laughter as they reminisced about Margaret's quirks, her obsession with crossword puzzles, her habit of humming show tunes while gardening, her uncanny ability to predict plot twists in mystery novels. By the end of the night, Clara felt lighter, as though she'd taken another step toward reclaiming the pieces of herself she'd lost along the way. Inspired by these moments of connection and the overwhelming response she'd received from strangers touched by her story, Clara decided to write a memoir. At first, the idea terrified her. How could she possibly capture the complexity of her journey? The pain of betrayal, the weight of her mother's sacrifices, the resilience it took to fight back. But as she began drafting chapters late into the night, sitting at the same desk where Margaret had left behind her warnings, Clara realized the book wasn't just for others, it was for herself. Writing became a form of therapy, a way to process everything she'd endured and celebrate the strength she'd discovered within. Each word was a tribute to Margaret's courage, a testament to the enduring power of maternal love. She titled the memoir, "Truth Will Set You Free," borrowing the phrase that had unlocked the secrets hidden on the old computer. Within its pages, Clara wove together personal anecdotes, reflections on trust and intuition, and practical advice for recognizing manipulative behavior. She included excerpts from Margaret's journal entries and audio recordings, ensuring her mother's voice remained a central thread throughout the narrative. The memoir wasn't intended solely as a cautionary tale. It was also a celebration of survival. Clara wanted readers to understand that healing was possible, that even in the darkest moments, there was hope. And perhaps most importantly, she wanted to remind them of the importance of listening to their instincts, just as her mother had urged her to do. When the manuscript was complete, Clara sent it to a publisher recommended by a friend. To her surprise, they accepted it immediately, praising its emotional depth and universal themes. As publication approached, Clara prepared for the inevitable scrutiny and media attention, knowing the book would reignite discussions about Ethan's crimes. But she faced it all with quiet resolve, fortified by the knowledge that sharing her story might help someone else avoid the pain she'd endured. On the day the memoir hit shelves, Clara returned to the backyard, where the remnants of the old oak tree still lay scattered across the soil. She carried a copy of the book with her, its cover bearing a photograph of her and Margaret taken during one of their last summers together. Kneeling beside the exposed roots, she placed the book gently among the earth, whispering a soft thank you to the woman who had guided her through the shadows. As she stood brushing dirt from her hands, Clara noticed something she hadn't seen before. Tiny green shoots pushing through the soil near the base of the fallen tree. Life emerging from decay, resilience sprouting from ruin. A fitting symbol of her own journey and her mother's indomitable spirit. With a final glance at the budding branches, Clara turned and walked back toward the house, ready to embrace whatever the future held. For the first time in years, she felt whole again, not because the scars had disappeared, but because she'd learned to carry them with grace. Margaret's legacy lived on, not only in the pages of Clara's memoir, but in the strength she had passed down to her daughter. And as long as Clara continued to honor that legacy, her mother's love would never fade. Months had passed since the whirlwind of revelations, arrests, and public reckonings. Yet Clara's life continued to evolve in ways she never anticipated. The memoir had resonated deeply with readers, sparking conversations not just about manipulation and emotional abuse, but also about resilience and healing. Bookstores across the country hosted signings where Clara met women and men who shared their own stories of betrayal and recovery. Each encounter left her humbled and inspired, reinforcing her belief that speaking out could create ripples of change. One evening, after a particularly moving discussion at a local bookstore, Clara decided to attend a support group meeting for survivors of emotional abuse. She hesitated outside the door, unsure if she was ready to step into such an intimate space. But as she listened to the voices inside, soft, tentative, yet brimming with courage, she felt drawn to join them. The room was small and unassuming, filled with mismatched chairs arranged in a circle. As Clara introduced herself, she noticed the way others leaned forward, their eyes reflecting a mix of pain and hope. They spoke openly about gaslighting partners, controlling family members, and the slow erosion of self-worth. And when it was her turn to share, Clara found herself recounting not only her experience with Ethan, but also the lessons she'd learned from her mother. "Trust your instincts," she said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "Even when everyone else tells you you're wrong, even when you doubt yourself, listen to that quiet voice inside. It knows." Her words hung in the air, met with nods and murmurs of agreement. One woman, tears streaming down her face, whispered, "Thank you. I needed to hear that tonight." Clara realized then that this was more than a support group. It was a lifeline. For so long, she had carried her pain alone, afraid to burden others or appear weak. Now, surrounded by people who understood her struggle, she felt lighter, freer. Helping them navigate their journeys became a form of healing for herself. A reminder that she wasn't defined by what had been done to her, but by how she chose to move forward. Weeks later, on a crisp autumn morning, Clara sat at her desk sipping coffee while reviewing notes for an upcoming speaking engagement. Her phone buzzed softly, pulling her attention away from the screen. An email notification blinked back at her, a subject line written in her own handwriting. "To my future self." Her breath caught. She vaguely remembered drafting the email years ago during a workshop on personal growth. At the time, she'd thought it was a silly exercise, something meant to inspire future optimism. But now, opening it felt like unwrapping a gift she hadn't known she needed. Dear Clara, if you're reading this, it means you've made it through whatever storms have come your way. I'm proud of you, not because everything went perfectly. Let's be real, life rarely works like that. But because you kept going, you trusted yourself, even when it was hard, even when the world tried to tell you otherwise. Remember why you started writing this note, to remind yourself that strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up every single time. That love should lift you higher, not weigh you down, and that no matter what happens, Mom would be proud. Keep fighting for the life you deserve. You are enough, always. With love. Your past self. Tears blurred Clara's vision as she read the final line. Mom would be proud. The words struck a chord deep within her, echoing the affirmations she'd sought her entire life. Margaret's warnings, her sacrifices, her relentless pursuit of truth, all of it had led Clara here, to a place where she could stand tall and embrace her worth without apology. She closed the email and leaned back in her chair, staring out the window at the golden sunlight filtering through the trees. Life hadn't turned out the way she'd planned, but perhaps that was the beauty of it. Through loss and betrayal, she had discovered a strength she didn't know she possessed, a strength born of love, resilience, and the unshakable bond between a mother and daughter. As she rose to pour herself another cup of coffee, Clara smiled faintly, feeling the warmth spread not just in her hands, but in her heart. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she wouldn't face them alone. She had her memories, her brother, and the countless souls she'd connected with along the way. And above all, she had her mother's enduring legacy, a guiding light that would continue to shine, illuminating the path toward trust, truth, and triumph. With renewed purpose, Clara returned to her notes, ready to write the next chapter, not just of her book, but of her life.